Okay, let us start. You're able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So today's session is going to be a bit basics. It will be about conditional for statements, and we are going to see a bit about recursion. All right. Very well. So as always, please use the chat window. I'll just try to create a new package itself here. Okay, sorry. So kind of this session is going to be covering about a bit of basics only, which most of the people might have known already. But even though, let's see that. Just creating a class. With the main method, you can always include a main method from this window itself. All right. There is no need to. There are few functionalities which our IDE provides. One of the useful thing is like whenever you create a class, you check this box. Main method will be automatically created for you. Just going to create it. Let's check for a basic conditional statements, right? Let's declare an integer with a is equal to 50. All right. So everyone must have been aware of if statements and else statements, right? If else. So basic syntax for that in Java is, let's say if a is, you should always equal to, I mean, use double equals, right? In terms of uh, this, and just say sys out true, right? So what it will do, it will just say check for a conditional, right? If a is equal to 50, then it will print true. I'll try to run this program. So it's printing true. Again, we can use multiple combinations of if, right? For example, I can use if statement inside if also, right? I'll print true here, and I'll say one more if statement inside the if block. I will say if a is lesser than 100, then probably I'll print the input was lesser than 100. So now if we try to run this program, so now both the condition are true, then the second statement is executed. All right. So now again, if we reverse this statement, it will again, the condition is false, so the statement is not executed. So you can go on create n number of if conditions inside an if condition. I can go and create an if condition inside this block also, right? So if always check for true or false only, right? So what I'm going to do, instead of validating some condition, I'm going to directly going to declare true here. So I'm just going. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to print something here. So what you can directly pass a boolean value directly inside a if statement also like this, right? So what it will do, it will always execute this particular block. Okay, this condition is not executed if you put this condition, because if condition is present in this if statement, if block, right? So once this pass only, then it comes. But once if the execution comes to this line of code, it will always execute, right? The true block. Again, I can go and give false here as well, right? But what is the warning it is throwing here? Dead code. Why it is saying dead code? Can anyone say why it is throwing a warning like dead code? Hello, am I audible, right? Or you can post it in chat as well. So I'm giving false here. Why it is saying dead code? Why it's throwing a warning here? It is still executing, but what is happening here? Why it is saying dead code then? Am I audible, right, everyone? Okay. Because we are directly giving false as an argument, right? This statement will be, this block will be never executed because it is always false. So even if this statement is there or it is not there, doesn't make any difference at the code level. So it is showing dead code. So whenever you are writing some huge blocks of program, there might be some conditions where the code will end up always be like every time that will be a false statement only. The true statement will never come. So in those cases, it will the compile itself, or rather than the Eclipse itself will throw a dead code error. So then you can safely remove this code. Keeping this code or removing this code doesn't make any difference. So that is the whole idea. And you can go and use n number of else statement here also, right? I can say else if a is equal 0. Just printing something in the console. I will just remove this code. So now what will happen? This particular else block is never executed because the first condition itself is becoming true. Now what if I change this 50 to 0? So now the second else statement is executed, right? What if I'm giving some random value like this 10? Or yeah. So now what will happen? It is executed, but nothing happened, right? Nothing happened because both the if condition failed. So to do something by default, we can always add a else condition, right? So now what will happen if you try to run this code? Now even though both the condition fails, the else statement is always executed, right? So I cannot go and add something like this. It's showing me an error, right? Delete this else token, right? Because you cannot add an else if after an else should be a final statement. So that's the whole idea. And I can have some if block inside this else if block as well, inside this else block as well. If, so I can add something, I can write some logic here, it will execute. I can have some if block inside this also. So multiple if blocks, if else blocks inside an if or else is also possible, right? So you can go and do the nesting of all these if and else conditions one by one without any problem. The only caveat is that whenever there's a master if block, else should be the final call. That's the only caveat here, right? Okay. What I will do, I'll just remove this, and there is one more conditional statement execution called switch, right? Everyone would have been aware. Let's say int s is equal to 3. What I'm just going to do, just going to switch. Yes, right. Mm, let's print something here. You should always include the break statement, because once the switch statement identifies the right combination, then the execution should break at that point itself. So break is a keyword in Java where you will say, hey, if this condition is satisfied, then don't need to continue the remaining piece of code. You can directly break the execution from there itself, like that, right? Let's say case 2, just copy and paste this here. I'll just print. Let's try to run this program. So I'm assigning a value of 3 here. I'm switching the s. So case 1 means what? It will check if the s is value 1 and it's not true. Then it will not come inside this statement at all. 2 is also fails, and it will not come inside the statement at all. And 3, it's correct, right? So it is coming inside the statement and it's executing. You can put a break here also. So what if my s is 4 here? Nothing is executed. This default statement is executed, right? So whenever you include default, the compiler will know, even though all the condition fails, I can still go and execute my default statement. So this is kind of an yeah, equivalent to else block in if right. If has a else block, so if equivalent else block of switch statement is default statement. You can put a break here also. So this will be executed irrespective of whatever the case may fail or not fail. So I can combine two statements also. For example, so what if I'm having a particular scenario where even though if it is 1 or 2, I need the same kind of logic to be executed here. Then I can combine these two cases like this. If it's case 1 or 2, then go and execute this particular statement only. Like, for example, I will just put this as 1. So it is executing here, right? Even if I put this as 2, then it will execute the same block as well. So I can combine statements like this. That is also possible in switch statements. So are we good until now? Everyone can you post it in chat? Are we good until now? Okay. So, okay, let's move on. Just delete this piece of code. So we saw if statements, how if can be used inside a if block, nested if blocks, and what a cell statement, and how to use a switch case and all, right? So one particular use case or switch case is with respect to enum, whatever we saw. So switching over that particular enum and executing whatever logic we have in the enum block, that is also possible. But when to use if, when to use switch, both are almost identical, right? One use case is like if condition can be used when you have a nested if statement, then that is very useful actually. Some multiple condition you have to check. I can combine. Okay, I just I'll show that thing also. For example, let's take the same in this a is equal to 5, right? I can say if a is equal to 3, I can combine this logical grouping also. Or a is equal to 5, then I can go and do something here. Right, if you try to run this, then it's executing, right? So even if you give 3 here, then the same logic will apply. But if you give some random number here, let's say 4, then nothing will happen. It will execute, but we haven't printed anything in the console, right? So we can use these multiple conditions as well inside the if block. I can go and put this inside a square bracket, and I can put an and condition also. I can include some variable b like this, b is equal to 6. I can just say if b is equal 6. I can, it's possible that way also is possible. I can combine multiple and or logic inside an if block, right? So in those cases, if statements are very useful. And there is also not logic, right? So I can say if a is a not logic, you'll say with this exclamatory mark and equal to symbol. If a is not equal to 4, then do something like this, right? Just comment this b for time being. So now what will happen if this is, it will execute or not? So this will not execute, right? Because a is equal to 4, this condition fails. Everyone got the point, right? So I'm just going to assign another number here. Let's say assign 40. Then if I try to execute, then it will execute because the condition becomes true. A is not equal to 4. So you can combine and or not logic multiple ways inside an if block, and you can go and write water logic inside the block also. That is also possible with if block. Whereas in switch statement, you have generally switch based upon one particular input, right? That's the limitation of switch statement. But generally, which is faster? Switch statement is very faster. If you have simple comparison like this, then it's better to go to switch because switch is generally faster than if statements. Very fast actually in execution. So I can combine this multiple logical operations along with if statements, conditional operators. I can group them and I can execute like these things also. I have greater than, lesser than. It's not about equals. I have greater than operator. If a is greater than 4, then this will execute, right? Obviously, a is greater than 4 here. So you can combine these things in multiple ways. That's the whole idea. So, very clear? So we'll move on to loops. We saw loops in general, right? In the previous example or previous string class, we saw how we can iterate over a loop. in general, right? We'll just see a basic example. Let's say I have a string. Um, String var is equal to, let's say, Java. So how can I use this for loop to iterate in each and every character inside a iteration itself? Whenever you encounter a term iteration, you have to use loops, right? Either for loop or while loop. Generally, for loops are simpler to implement and simpler logic than it is used. How we can iterate? I can just say. So inside a for loop, we have to initialize a variable, right? Something for the us to iterate. How many counts we have to iterate we have to know, right? So I just we'll usually in a general convention to initialize an I variable of type integer here. So we are initializing it with the value, initial value itself in I is equal 0, and up to what condition I have to execute. I is lesser than this length of this input, right? And after each iteration, I have to increment I so that this loop doesn't execute forever, right? I just try to print this each and every character here. So character will give the index of what index? Ith index of each and every iteration. I'll just try to run this program. It is splitting each and every character into J, A, V, and A, and it's printing each and every character, right? So I remove this I plus plus statement. Now what is happening? It's continuously printing J, right? Infinitely. There's no end to this. And at any one point of time, you will hit stack overflow error. So it's kind of an infinite loop, right? Why it's an infinite loop? Can anyone say? Just stop this. Why this is an infinite loop? Can anyone say?
Because the I is not increasing, so it's always less than 1.
Yeah, yes, because I is always less than the length of this variable, which is 4. So this condition is always true. So it will be kind of for loop is always executed like infinitely. It will not execute infinite times, but at least it will lead to some memory error or stack overflow error. So these kind of checks are very, very important. You have to always check for what base condition that it has to satisfy so that the loop stops in a particular value. So I can include some if condition also inside this for loop. I can combine both for loop and if loop here. For example, let's say I don't want to iterate the entire length. I can just say if I is equal to 2, just stop. How I'm going to stop this particular loop. I just can just say break. Okay. Let's try to run this here. So it's printing only two variables instead of JA and VA because each and every loop it will check for this if condition. If this condition matches, then we are saying break. What is break? We are just breaking the loop. So after this, the for loop is not executed for remaining conditions. So are we getting this logic? So break statements are very frequently used in programming, all right, because we don't have to iterate to enter a string or enter arrays for that matter. Once we find our desired output, we can always break the loop, right? So it is not advisable to go through entire array. For example, if an array or string may contain some 1 lakh characters, our desired searching is ending up to third character, fourth character, then why we have to iterate to remaining 1 lakh characters also? So it is always like kind of compromising the time complexity, right? That's one more thing which I wanted to show. So what is happening? There's some statement called continue, right? So what continue do unless if the statement becomes true, then it will continue the execution, right? So continue is kind of rare, which we use in Java. So break is most commonly used. So break and continue are kind of complementing to each other, right? So what it will do, one simple thing we have to understand uh, in continue statement. For example, in the first iteration, I is equal to 0, right? This condition is not satisfied. So if the condition is not, if I mean this condition is satisfied actually, sorry, the condition is satisfied because I is not equal to 2, right? But we are giving continue here. But why this statement is not executed? Why we are not printing J here? Why only V is printed here? Can anyone say?
Because skipping past that statement and going directly to the
Sorry, your voice is feeble, breaking.
because it's skipping that print statement and going again.
Yes, actually, it will skip the remaining step. Whenever you, one biggest disadvantage of continue is like it will not continue the entire things below whatever we coded below. It will just if you give continue, it will again go to this for loop. It will not execute the statement below. Right? Only when I is equal to 2, this statement becomes false. Then this will execute the statement. So only we are getting to print only v. Right? I hope it is not confusing. Because when I is equal to 2, this statement false, right? Yeah, we are checking for what condition? We are checking for I is not equal to 2 condition. But in this condition, I is equal to 2. So this continue statement will not be executed. Now this sysout will be executed. So we are only printing that v variable here. Getting the whole point? So continue is kind of inverse to break, but we have to be very careful with continue because the remaining statements will not be executed. That's the whole point. So we can combine this for loop and if block together to stop or continue the looping whenever we want. That's the whole idea. So how can we iterate through an array actually? Let's see. I have a string array, right? Instead of this, I can put something like this inside the flower braces. Java or Selenium. So how can I iterate this? Instead of the notation of a function method, you can just say length, and I can just delete this logic. I can just say this out. Now how I am going to print this output? I'm just going to, instead of caret, I'm just going to say, I'm just printing each and every variable itself here, right? Each and every thing which we are given in this string array. Now it will print everything, Java, Selenium, Cucumber. This is a notation of declaring a string array. What's a string array? It is a sequence of elements present in the sequence memory location in an array format. So we are having this array of strings inside this variable object. So we're iterating through variable object. We are printing each and every element in that array. Each and every element is what? Java, Selenium, and Cucumber. So did we get the point? So I can combine another for loop also like this. I can put a for loop inside a for loop. For example, in the first iteration, I'll get a Java, right? What if I want to split this Java again? Again, I can use something like the j is equal to 0, j is lesser than variable of the first iteration dot length j. So sorry, it's J actually. J plus plus. I can just print variable of uh, I dot character at variable index of j, right? If we try to run this program now, okay, it has resulted in array of bound exception. So what we have to, okay, length length j plus plus is out variable of j dot k. Yes, it's printing. So what we are basically doing here, we are just getting each and every string from this particular string array, and we are printing each and every the character of the string, right? So if you see this output, it's printing JAVA, selenium, cucumber, each and every character only it's printing. I can just put a sys out here also to print the entire array itself. If you try to run this, it's printing Java, JAVA, selenium, and it's each and every character, cucumber, each and every character, right? So is this okay, or still I want to go through this one more time, or is it confusing, or what it is? For loop inside a for loop. Can anyone respond in chat? Arun, please. I know this is a holiday and kind of, but if you can please let me know in chat, it will be helpful for me. Okay, only one person responded. What about others? I hope no one is sleeping in the class. Okay. Okay, we'll move on then. So there is one more thing in Java called for each loop, right? For example, anyway, I have decided to iterate through each and every element. Why have to find a length every time and print all these values? Well, there can be some mechanism where it will inbuiltly know each and every element and print all the elements of the array, right? There's something called for each loop. So the syntax goes like this: for inside this, just note this carefully. String s inside this var. I'm just going to print this yes. So what it will it is printing the same thing, but the notation here is very simple. The syntax is very simple and easier to understand, right? So for each and every string, what is the meaning of this? For each and every string in this variable string array, assign this particular string to this yes, and just print this yes, right? So what it will do? This variable var has here is a string array which has three elements: Java, Selenium, and Cucumber. So at each iteration, it will assign this value to this particular yes. So in first iteration, it will assign Java value to yes. So it is coming inside this block. It is printing Java. Second iteration, it will assign Selenium to yes. It is printing Selenium. And third iteration, Cucumber, it's printing Cucumber. So it's very easy. So if you try to do some action over the entire array itself, surely for this, I'm going to iterate to entire array. Then probably you can use this for loop as for each loop as well. Whatever we saw previously was for loop. This one is for each loop. So name itself implies, right? We are iterating to each and every element in that for loop. So it's for each loop. Even you can go use some if condition here and break. That is also possible. But it's a simple way of doing in Java. Right? This is also possible. So why I'm using string here? Why not any other thing? Why I'm using a string here near the yes? Sorry.
because it's a string array.
Yeah, because it's a string array, right? For example, if it's an integer array, something like this, let's say 1 2 1 3, then I should use int, right? String will not take because it will throw an error. Now it's printing 1 2 3. Right? So whatever the type of data type you're going to iterate, that thing only you have to declare. That data type only you have to declare here for the temporary variable you're assigning here. So that is the whole point. Right. So okay, I think there is one more for each loop which we'll use in collection framework. Uh, that is a little kind of advanced topic. Maybe when we see collections, we'll see that for each loop also. There is another for each loop also, for just for your information, letting you know. Okay. So what I'm going to do, we saw for loop, if statements, else statements, we saw switch, and we saw for loops. How there are two different types of for loops which we can use. And now we are going to see about while loop, right? Let's again say int a is equal to, let's say, let's declare 0, right? What I'm going to do, I'm just going to declare a while statement. While statement is what? When until the statement inside this block becomes false, it will execute, right? That's the thing. What if I say if while a is lesser than, let's say 6, I'm just going to print something here. It's out. I'll just print something like, hey, I'm in loop, right? So there should be some condition to break this loop, right? All right. So I'm just going to say inside this loop itself, a plus plus. A plus plus is what? It's an increment operator. So each and every iteration, it will increment the value of a. Let's try to run this program. So it's going to print in 6 times, right? So we got the whole idea, right? Why it's printing 6 times. So what if I remove this a plus plus here? What will happen? Can anyone say what is the output of this program? Infinite loop, yes. So if we try to run this program, it's going on infinitely, right? So there should be always some base condition, so that the execution always stops. So that is the basic idea, right? I can again give true or false here. So while true is what? Again, it's an infinite loop, right? While true means it will go on execute this particular code again and again infinitely. But what if I give while false here? Same thing, it's throwing an error, right? Why it's throwing an error? Unreachable code, because while false, this is never going to execute, right? What's the use of this code? So it's the kind of an unreachable code. So there can be some condition here. Make sure that condition never reaches false. Never, it's set as false defaultly or automatically. I just give 5. It will go and execute, because we are not given base condition. Just give a plus plus here, right? So that's a basic idea. So what's a do while loop then? Let's say a is equal to 1. I just giving do, just printing something here. Sorry. So what it will do, it will not check for the condition initially. It will first execute this, then it will check for the condition. So only it's executing only 4 times, right here. So it will first execute this, will check for condition. A is still lesser than A is, A will be 2 here. It is still lesser than 5. It will execute. A is still lesser than 5 because it will be 3. So it is executing 4 times, right? What if I give A is lesser than 2? Or still is going to execute. What if I give A is lesser than 1? Still is going to execute, because even though this condition fails, do block will execute at least once in our scenario, right? So we should also be very careful while having this do block also, right? What if I'm again commenting this and executes again? It's an infinite loop, right? Because we have never reached the base condition yet. So we create this do while loop also, everyone. Okay. So we have seen if else, switch statement, how to combine switch statements, for loop, for each loop, while block, do while block. So these are the very basics, and we also saw how we can combine logical operators along with our if conditions, right? We can combine and or not multiple ways so that we can reach multiple different combinations of logics in our program. So that is also possible. We can use for loop inside of for loop. So in most of your program, just using for loop inside a for loop, just one thing inside of one thing is kind of okay. But what if I'm having one for loop here? For example, I'm having one for here. I'm having one for here. It's kind of general. If you kind of use this, it's kind of generally not advisable, because it in very rare scenarios we use this for inside this for multiple nested fors actually, because the time complexity of our program is going on increasing. So for n inputs, this is going to be n operation in single for. For the second for loop, it's going to be n square, and for third for loop, it's going to be n cube. So n cube is what? For example, n, if you have 5 inputs, it will execute for 5 iterations. If you have for loop inside for loop, it will execute for 25 iterations, right? N square. So as you nest a for loop, its complexity is going to increase along with the number of input data we are going to give. So we have to be very careful with the for loops actually. So we should not end up doing for inside for multiple times, because it will slow up the entire operation. So that's a basic idea. So before signing this off, I just quickly wanted you to show like what is a recursion. Yeah, anyone's aware of what is a recursion actually? What's a recursive function? Can you post it in chat? Okay. One person has said no. What about others?
Actually, I learned it, but I just can't remember.
Okay. Actually, personally, when I was learning recursion, it was kind of little hard for me to understand initially. Later on, it was okay, because we all know how we can call a function. But what if a function can call a function itself? What I mean by is like, for example, everyone know what's a factorial, right? We'll just see a factorial program in recursion. What's a factorial? If I give some input as 4, what's the factorial of that number 4? That is 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, right? Basic mathematics, right? What's the factorial of 5? 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, right? You know, aware of what is a factorial, right? Whatever number we give until 1 comes, we have to multiply the subsequent numbers. If it's 6, 6 into 5 into 4 into 3 into 1. So whatever we get this as an output, what's this output? 5 4 20, 60, 120. 120 is the output. So factorial of 5 is 120. Factorial of 4 is 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, right? 4 into 3, 12, 12 into 24, right? So factorial of 4 is 24. So this is how we calculate factorial, right? There are two ways of doing this factorial program. One through iteration. Iteration very simple. Again, we use a for loop. Multiply by multiplying the like I decrement this and multiply it, and we can get the output, right? But instead of doing that way, we are going to use something called recursion. All right. So what I will do, I just going to give this number, right? Whatever factorial I want to find, I are just going to give this number as input. For example, let's say int number is equal to 5 itself, right? What I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a function here to calculate the factorial. The function will return integer as an output because the factorial's output is an integer. So what's a general idea? Public, just including static here. Don't get carried away by what is static. We'll just forget about what is static for now. We just focus on remaining logic. Int is creating a function called factorial to calculate factorial. We're just getting the argument here, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write some logic here. If condition, if num is equal to 0, or let's say lesser than or equal to 0, I'm just going to return 1. Because what is factorial of 0? It is 1, right? You're getting it, right? But what if the input is not 1 or above 1 and all? I'm just going to say return factorial of num, sorry, not factorial, return num into factorial of num minus 1, right? Probably enclose this. We'll just see what is happening here. I'm just going to call this function here. I'm just going to sys out the factorial of given number is, just going to call this function here of this number, right? Just try to run this program and see what happens. So it's giving me 120, right? Can anyone try to explain explain me what is happening here? See, we all know factorial is a function. What is a function or method? Factorial is a method. We can call it as function also, right? So that is a method in Java. Any block of code which is dedicated to execute or perform certain functionality, right? So this particular block of code is returning some number. That number is only we are printing here. What number is returning? It's returning 120. The 120 only we are printing here. For example, if the number is 4, it's going to print 24, right? That's a factorial of 4. So how it is kind of, so what is happening is like when this particular line of code is executed, it is going to call this function, all right? So input for this function is this number itself, 4, right? So 4 will come here. After that, what is happening? Can anyone try to explain? So when the line number 9 is executed, it's going to print something like this: factorial of given number is, and it's going to call this function factorial, which we defined here. And what argument input we are passing 4 as an argument. So 4 will come here, right, in this argument. So now can anyone try to explain what is happening here?
So the number is greater than 0. So it will go to the second statement, return else
Your
statement.
kind of your voice is kind of not audible or very feeble actually.
Hello.
Yeah, can you be a little louder?
Okay. So the number is greater than 0, so it will go to the else statement.
It will go to else. Now here what is happening?
So the number is 5. So 5 multiplied by factorial. So it's calling again the same it's recursion itself. So it will go to the in factorial statement. Again, it will like
Yes, yes,
it's
yes,
kind of hard to explain. Okay. So 5, then uh, okay.
yes. So
That,
yes, it's correct.
the
What
most
is
of that
happening
I
here is,
find.
what is happening here is like there is something called recursion tree. It will form, right? If you go to Google, uh, I'm not going to go deep into recursion tree. It's a very big concept actually, right? It will do something like this, right? This is what you call a recursion tree. So what I'll try to explain in this program perspective itself. So in the initial iteration, the 4 will come here, right? Number 4 will come here. It will check for this logic where the number is lesser than or equal to 0. Obviously the 4 is not lesser than or equal to 0, so this if condition is not executed. Then it will come to this else block. Now what is happening, forget the return statement for now. Else block contains what? This number itself, that is the 4 itself, into we are calling the same function factorial inside this function itself. Inside a function, it's kind of an this movie, right? Dream Within a Dream. Christopher Nolan movie. I hope
Inception.
everyone say, yeah, Inception. So it's kind of an Inception kind of thing is happening. What you can relate to that? You can go dream within a dream, right? So it's kind of calling a function within the function itself. So what is happening here is like uh, number 4 is here. So again, I'm calling the same function within the function, but what argument I'm passing here? Number minus 1. So this function will be called, but this time the argument will contain the value 3, right? Now again, this it will check for the statement here. 3 is again greater than 0. So if condition will not be executed, again this 3 will come here. 3 into factorial of 3 minus 1. Now again this function will be called. Now what will happen? 2 is passed as an argument here, right? Again 2 is greater than 0. Again this will be called. Now 2 into factorial of 2 minus 1, 1 will be called, right? Again 1 is greater than 0. Again this function will be called. Now at the fifth iteration only, the argument is passed as 0. Now this statement becomes true. Now it's returning 1. So in the last iteration, it will return 1. The 1 is multiplied by 2 here, because the previous iteration we had 2 in this particular num variable. So now 2 is returned to the previous factorial thing, and previous factorial contained what? 3. So it becomes 3 into 2 6, and it will return the function back, the control back here. Now the 6 will multiply by the previous holder value. Num will contain 4 at that iteration. So 6 into 4 is 24. Again it will come to the master block and return 24 here. This executed here. I know it's kind of hard to understand. Maybe we'll try to do one thing. We'll just try to put a breakpoint here. We'll try to run this, right? uh, okay. So now it is in this particular step. What we can do, we can try to um, watch this, right? We'll delete all these things. We'll try to add this num to watch window. Watch window is something where you can watch the values of respective variables during the runtime itself, right? So now just imagine what is happening here, and we can probably watch this entire expression as well, right? So in the we in first iteration, the value num is 4, right? Here the number is 4, right, in the first iteration. Now this if condition fail, it is coming to this else block. Now the num is 4 here. Now again it's calculating the factorial of num minus 1. Now see, the factorial of num minus 1 is 6, right? It's already calculated because we are evaluating the entire expression. Now what if I want to go inside this expression and see? Now num value is 3, right? Because we are passing n minus 1 as an argument. 4 minus 1 is 3. It's coming as 3 here. Now again this if block condition will fail. It will come to else block. Again if we, it will go to the else block. Again the call this function with what argument? This num value will decrease to from 3 to 2, right? See, it's decreasing, right? So again 2 is greater than 0. It will not execute. It will come to the else part. Again this factorial method will be called. Again coming here. Now the num value is 1. 1 is again greater than 0. Now it is again coming to this part, else part. Again, if you go here, then only the num value is becoming 0 at the fifth iteration, right? Now this statement becomes true. Now num is lesser than equal to 2, so it will return 1. So it will go inside this if block, it is returning 1, and it is coming to the previous step where we call the factorial. Now this particular function returned 1, and the value of num is also equal to 1. So as you can see here, sorry, in the watch window, now 1 and 1, right? So this 1 and 1 will multiply and return the value to the previous factorial called, right? So now 1 is returned. What is the previous num value? 2 was there, right? The previous, before we call this function at that particular iteration. So now 2 into 1 will be executed, and it is returning to the same control here in the particular previous call. Now num value is 3. 3 into 2 will be executed. Now it's again coming here, and 3 into 2 is 6, right? So 6 is the value of expression here, factorial of num minus 1. Again, this particular iteration num value is 4. So 6 into 4 is equal to 24. It will return the 24 as a value, and we are printing it here. I hope it's definitely confusing. Like, can you anyone say who got this idea, or who is still in confusion state? Can post it in a chat. Everyone, can you do it? Just calling a function within a function, but each function calling will be alive unless we return the value here, right?
Actually, I'm little confused about the written one statement. Number less than
Sorry,
zero.
your kind of voice is breaking again.
I'm like little confused about the if statement. If num less than equals to zero, written one.
Because we don't want to execute this condition again and again, right? If you don't have this if block at all, if this condition at all, then it is going to call this function infinitely, and it will lead to some error called stack overflow error. For example,
But
uh,
what happens like it returns one to like what?
this is called base condition for any recursion actually, right? It is returning 1 because factorial value doesn't go below beyond 1, right? So only in the base condition we're returning 1. Even zeros factorial is 1, right? And even if we find factorial for any number 3, 2, and all, finally it's going to multiply with 1, right? Factorial of 3 into 3 is what, 3 into 2 into 1 only, right? So any base condition returns value of 1 only, because that makes sense, because 0 factorial is also 1, and any factorial which you are going to find ultimately is going to multiply with the value 1 at the end, even though it's the same number.
When we're calling the factorial function in the previous print statement, at the end it will at the end number will be zero, right? So
Yeah,
will it
number is
return one?
0. It will return 1 where it will return to the previously called function. It will not
Okay,
return
okay,
the control directly to here, right? It is returning 1, but
okay,
to whom it is returning? To the previously called function. Who is calling this function? This statement is calling the function, not this, right?
okay, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is where most of the people gets the confusion. Like, I have written the number, why this control is not coming here, because this function didn't call this particular method at that particular iteration. This function calls this method only at the first iteration. Remaining calls is done by this statement only at line number 22. So the return control will go to this statement only, right? Okay, one thing we can do, we can go through this iteration with another example maybe in the next class. But before that, I just wanted to understand, like, who didn't get all this recursion thing, right? You can post it in chat. It will be helpful for me to kind of go through the same thing again in the next class itself. Can everyone please post it in the chat? Or let me put the question like this: who still wants to uh, have this say about iteration one more time? Can you post it in the chat? I hope some people are online only, like 7 people apart from me are online. Yes. Mithun, okay. What about others? Sakshi, Vinay, Rajni, Deepta, Varsha. Okay, we'll have it again with a different example. Maybe I'll try to prepare some chart to explain it better. But before coming to next class, what I want you to do is like just even this program is available in internet. Just go to Google and type recursion for factorial program in Java. You can just double tap in the left pane for some breakpoint. If you go to this debug mode and execute in debug mode, wherever you keep the breakpoints, the execution will be temporarily paused there. You can just right click this number and just say watch, right? So it will just add this to the watch window, and you can see the values in the runtime itself. So just we'll go to this one more time. So just go do this and try to understand like what is happening in the runtime, what are the how the values are changing for this num variable in the runtime. And please, if possible, do this and come and we'll see detail about the recursion in the next class also. All right. Because recursion is kind of very important concept in most of the coding interviews. This is a very common question in coding interview. This question and find a Fibonacci series using recursion. That is also a very important question. This and find Fibonacci using recursion. These two are very important programming questions. Most of the time I was encountering these questions actually. So anyone has any other questions about today's class? Because we are going to wrap it up. Okay. I'll be sharing the recording within tonight.